principle of cause and effect, I think it's also referred to as what thou sowest, so shall thou reap. Let's take some considerations and make some corrections in our actions and recognize the issues before all of us here at Midgard of the higher self and the lower self, and choose your side. Because you're not going to serve two masters and get this stuff off anymore. And you can stop playing dumb. You can keep playing dumb, and you'll just be part of the food for these vampires. You know, like I said to you before, Dr. Nayola, about 18 years ago, around the corner, and I did that lecture about evolve or become fodder. That's what's happening right now.
Yeah. A lot of things you spoke are coming to pass, have come and are coming. Even now with a fervor. You know, it's like
here they got what? Hundreds of ships. They'll say 50, 60, 70. Off the port of Long Beach, which is one of the largest ports in the north for trade. They're sitting out there. And though part of it is artificial, part of it is also because they are not accepting the U.S. Treasury bond for trade anymore, which I told you 10 years ago. Remember what we just talked about?
Yeah. And
guess what? Remember when, as you already know, we've been working on your kitchen, right?
6 months.
And when they kept beating you around with the delivery of your cabinets, before they admitted, I told you that they were having a supply issue, and they're not telling you that. But you continuously going around there having these meetings with them, they were forced to admit to you supply issues, didn't they?
Yes.
Now, what happened today when we happened to go to a certain place talking about windows? And I said it so that they would have to admit it. I said, you're having supply issues, aren't you? He said, yep. Well, I already knew that. I knew that a long time ago. Now, the deal of it is, when you comprehend the operations of the political platform, etc., knowing some of these things gives you not what you call a hand up, but it gives you a cognizance up on preparing how you run your life, knowing these things are going to come about so that you're not blindsided or you're less injured by, and you're better able to handle the crises that are going to be set before you because you know it's coming. Meaning that if you're going down a road and you already been given a map and you see the potholes, doesn't mean that you can't be slowed down. It doesn't mean that you can't bust your tires. But what it does mean is that you're already prepared, not be going full steam ahead, that you're starting to do what? Tiptoe through the tulips and figuring out ways to navigate where the being who's not aware of these traps goes headlong and he gets destroyed. We're all going to be injured by this, but you're better able to navigate this situation knowing it was coming. This is why we told people years ago, take your fiat out of the banks, start investing in what? Physical assets. Yeah. Convert your properties into allodial trusts. Buy silver, not because you can't get gold, because you're not going to be trading in gold. It's good security if you have finance, but you're never going to transact normal business with the gold. You will be transacting business with silver, though, around the world. Now, is it not upon us now, Dr. Nayola? Have we not discussed these very same things 10 years ago?
Sure have.
All right.
That's why I'm stacking.
And then a lot of these people around us was mad at Taji Guy one day. Said that Taji Guy was making this stuff up. Yeah, and like they ain't going to be affected by this too. But what they've been doing is what? Taking advantage of our people in their injury. Exploiting them and trying to get hundreds of notes from them, a revenue stream to deal with this existing problem rather than trying to cure the problem when all of us wouldn't have to worry about this economic suppression if we all in our conscious mind come together with the mind of rejecting Rome and correcting these principles, etc., and restoring the principles of proper jurisprudence, honoring our mothers and fathers, reclaiming our lost estate. And in the process, the vampire will die because you're immediately going to be taking these straws out your neck. Because much of it is done mental. It will then manifest in the physical.
If I can ask this question. There was a question about why, I can't find it, but basically she's asking why the nationality card is not accepted at airports and libraries.
Because they are de facto, which is why now you comprehend that they're not your government. The exercise is to liberate you from the concept that they are legitimate. They have you thinking that you're illegitimate. It's called projection. We told you this a long time ago. Even we send, have been teaching people over years to send writs. We tell you these are what? Proclamations and notices. You don't expect a response from them because they're not the legitimate government. But you needed to know that. Because you keep putting your faith and trust in them. They keep showing you they're de facto. Let's look at this realistically. How is it that persons who claim to be government don't accept a registered among themselves, rightfully, nationality card, but they will accept a contractual driver's license and then call it an identification card? And you allow that to take place and don't challenge it. And yet you make those kind of statements or questions when it's become obvious.
Because now they're asking for get you to get a real ID. So what did you have?
Oh, so there you go.
If now you got to get a real ID, well, what did I have before?
Let's go back to the problem that they're having right now. They're having this immigration problem that they so-called is happening with other Americans coming across the southern border of America. And then you have non-Americans who have been operating here who are questioning their nationality when they themselves don't have a nationality card. I suggest this to any of you. How many of you can share with us on any so-called website that you may have or platforms that you may have a U.S. identity card? Have you ever seen one? Just like you heard, just like you recognize this moment of silence.
Crickets.
It's exactly because it doesn't damn exist. So if they're claiming that a Moorish nationality card of identification is not the real one, tell them to show the real identification card. And did you ever notice while they're challenging the Moorish nationality card, they have not presented to you a nationality card themselves? It's called projection, which I told you of before. And the people keep giving them the credibility of being the legitimate government to even challenge anything. And they're de facto, absolute. Now, you see, years ago, Dr. Naila, remember about 7 years ago, myself and Sister Delilah shared with the people, we gave people copies of the United States Corporation registration. And you seen their corporate papers, and we showed you their corporate papers to literally show you the documents.
Yeah.
That they are a private corporation. They're not, quote unquote, a national government.
Even incorporated here in Delaware.
Of course, right around the corner. Right around the corner. And do you notice that most of all of their subdivisional corporations that are all over across the land, and even in Canada, and even in Australia, are registered around the corner and on the U.S. stock market? It's not a secret. And all of these intelligent people who are teaching law and civics won't tell the people that, will they? Why? Because most of them are getting their little paychecks from these subdivisional entity operations. If you vet them, you'll see that they're associated with bar associations and the Board of Education. So they're not going to rock the boat. So they're always going to talk against Prophet Noble Drew Ali, and they're always going to talk against the Constitution for the United States, which comes from Muslim law. Because once you start studying these principles of American law, you'll start recognizing not only that these people who claim to be government are frauds, but all of their so-called helpers in your community, you'll start recognizing for yourself that they've been placed among you, not by accident.
Let me see. Just Matak says, how can a Moor become a member of the Moors Order of the Round Table?
I've never made people members of the Moors Order of the Round Table except in its initiation of operations in 1982. And specifically, my sister Hydera pretty much dealt with a platform for the children, for development of the children, etc. And we had many people who were dealing with different platforms within that platform, but I mainly used that platform for publications and as a teaching platform, knowing that different organizations, because for those of you who know some of my history, in part of my history of my travels, I was an assistant minister in the Nation of Islam, and I was also a member in the Moor Science Temple of America, from which I derived a lot of information and knowledge. And I also recognized that within certain venues that I would not be permitted or allowed or cooperated with if I started telling certain fundamental truths and knowledge that I had before, during, or even after dealing with many of these people. I learned that early in my travels, which is why I established Moors Order of the Round Table in 1982, which would not have me under their jurisdictional venues, and I would not be hampered or sandbagged when I start exposing certain truths that I knew that would help our people. But I also knew that many people in all of our organizations were also compromised, and they really don't want our people to develop or to be liberated. They actually want them as taxpayers and bill payers for themselves. And they're in the business of making thrones for themselves. They're not in the business of either making the people erudite or liberating the people. They're in the business of feeding off of the victim mentality with no remedies and no cures. And they're more interested in preserving their clubs and their organizations. They're not interested in actually liberating the people or curing the problems. That's why I founded the Moors Order of the Round Table. And I also, in short order, after operating, didn't make a lot of members because I wasn't going to allow them to contaminate it and do what I saw them doing to many of the other orders. So I just used it as a platform for publishing.
Okay. Here's a question.
And because I also knew, in fact, that even the Moors Order Roundtable people around me were also planted or put as infiltrators, which is why at a point in the processes of developing and expanding and going around the country and sharing information, why certain people I was dealing with, you saw me, I stopped publishing with them because I already knew the feds were among us. And also one of the other strategies that I used, which is fifth-dimensional chess, was that I published the books out of sequence. Although I taught from all of them verbally and in notes over the years. So in case many of you wonder why certain books I hadn't published when people around me were publishing books. That's the real reason why, because some of them were plants. And I knew it. And for some part, many of them have made quite a good living off of stuff that I've already published. And what I did, I started choking their capacity to continue those processes. But in the process, which I stated earlier, in the process of them thinking that they were stealing, the people were being helped. And that was my motive. And I never hid that.
Okay, question. How did Al-Andalus become Spain, and what is the origin of the so-called Spanish and the so-called quote-unquote Jewish people? Who are they really?
This is now break the question. Ask two different questions.
How did Al-Andalus become Spain?
Now remember, after the fall, or basically they call it the War of Granada. And they also call it the fall of the Red House, that you hear them use that term in their Masonic orders, Red House, Blue House type thing. And you'll hear the Alhambra, which is considered one of the wonders of the world today. People from all around the world go to visit the Alhambra, and even to the day, different aspects of the Alhambra are still used on military operations, etc. And that is a Moorish city in Al-Andalus, etc. And after Boabdil ceded the Alhambra to the Visigoths, to the hoarding hordes of the hybrid Europeans in the wars, etc. That's where you get your Mummers Parade celebration in Philadelphia, January the 1st, etc. Because January the 1st, they near midnight is when the Alhambra fell, 1492, and so this is why they talk about the Columbus operations, which is really a military operation, not so much a man, of the conquest of the Moors, and in order to cover up Moorish history in Al-Andalus after the fall of the Moors. They called the area Spain, and then they called Moorish Latin, which is the language form, Spanish, to cover up Moorish history. So when you hear the word Spanish, Spanish don't damn exist. It was constructed as a cover-up of Moorish history. Spanish as a language is to cover up Moorish Latin. Spanish as a people is to cover up Moorish descendants, etc., of Al-Marak, etc., America, and of Al-Andalus. Yeah. And keep in mind, when you're looking at both the linguistic form and the nature of the structure of government, you're looking at the masculine and feminine principle infused in both the language. So you'll hear Al-Andalus and you'll hear Al-Andalusia. So you have the feminine and masculine form of linguistic transmission of communication in harmony with nature. And this is why you don't hear them or you don't see them in their reconstruction practices, including the feminine principle, where their mission has been to suppress the feminine nature or the divine feminine in all things for the sake of pressing forth the dark side of Babylonian magic, or what is known as the mastery of the lower self, do as thou wilt, etc., Satanism.
Even asked, Dripmore asked if you would speak on farmers getting paid to destroy crops. What's that about?
Say it again.
Farmers being paid to destroy crops.
Because they want to create a famine, which you already know. As the Prophet Noble Ali warned all of us, he says, the Europeans are going to try to starve you out. He let you know ahead of time what they intend to do so that you yourself can prepare yourself as far as storing non-perishables, as well as you getting back in harmony with Mother Earth and starting to grow your own foods, etc., i.e., start taking control of your life.
And I just heard something to state, and I'm trying to figure out how to say this so I won't anyway, that there was something, there's a document out where they had planned, their plans were to take sea victims, right, and who succumbed to it, and to liquefy their remains and use them in part of a solution to fertilize, put it for fertilizer.
They've already been doing that. See, when they tell you that they're planning to do something, guarantee you they've been doing it for decades. Why do you think that people are so mentally, what you call, torn now? You ever heard of mad cow's disease?
Sure have.
If you start looking at the degenerated level of intelligence among people in general, how many people know when they go to fast food operations that those fast food operations were really set up from a military perspective for actually getting rid of corpses and putting it into the food supply as hamburger, and that already in world court there are suits that are presently being litigated for human DNA being in all of your fast food so-called burger joints that the people been eating their own babies.
But there's a certain amount that they said they've approved. Look, they've approved a certain percentage. It could have.
They approved. The fact that they even approve it is an admission that they've been doing it, isn't it?
Well, they tried to say the DNA was from people handling it.
Haven't they made the people cannibals without telling them?
Absolutely.
All right, to justify their what? Their child sacrifice traditions that they've been doing to your missing children for a century or more. Roe versus Wade, Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood. And you keep pretending that you don't comprehend what's been going on, or that we, in our both ignorance and consent, have been participating with this fraud that has injured humanity. These are war crimes. Not prejudice, not racism. They're war crimes. That's how you should start talking. That's how you need to start looking at these politicians who are not your government. They're imposters.
Because I said so, asked, how do we find knowledgeable and trusted Moorish doctors to help with medical assessments of our health to protect us under Title 42, section.
You don't want to come.
Can I finish? Let me finish. Under Title 42, Section 1983, color of law from being forced by mandate.
You already know that mandate is not law. What you also know is you're identifying ongoing practices that prove that these people who've been saying they're your government are warring against you. You establish that even in the question. The other deal of it is now you comprehend why it's necessary for our people to become conscious of what it actually is, distinguished from what you've been shown, and to what? Exercise your intelligence together and start dismissing these people, i.e. firing them. How do you fire them? They're claiming to be officers of trust. They're claiming to be constitutional officers, which means legitimate delegated officers of trust, all of which they are not. Thus, you must start exercising, i.e. jurisprudence. Why do you think we've been encouraging the Moors around the country and outside of this country to start activating Article 3 consular court venues of diversity of nationality? Because you need to exercise your mind in jurisprudence. And you can't trust a lot of these people among your own who've been also exploiting you in the name of law classes when they're looking for a new revenue stream, not trying to fix a damn thing. However, if you yourselves on a larger basis get some of the fundamentals, get back to the simplicity of common law and common sense, let's not make this thing complicated. complicated or complex. It need not be and never did need to be. These opportunities that have been taking you through civil rules of procedure set up by the Bar Association to make simple law complex so that they can live off of you. That's why all the lawyers, attorneys, and their helpers have become so wealthy at the expense of the poor.
Isaac Lopez asks, how do I become a Moor?
You already are. I heard that name Lopez, I already know that you're Moor. If you're Taino, Borican, you're already a Moor. Moro. Thank you very much. Can't become what you already are. It's not a club. It's a bloodline. It's a pedigree. It's a birthright. Can't be sold. Must be claimed. Thank you very much. Hola.
Salon for Life says, Grand Sheik, can you explain the issue for the ships not allowed to come in the ports in California?
2 reasons. 1, they're not accepting U.S. Treasury bonds and trade anymore, i.e. the U.S. Federal Reserve notes. And I want all of you to start paying attention. And this is particularly in North America and Canada operations, which has the same international number, in case you all didn't know it. And you'll start noticing that some of the ATM machines, etc., or some of the places where you might do trade in grocery stores will start having entries where you put the notes in. It won't say place dollar bills here. It will be saying place note here. That's one of your signals. In other words, the hybrid operations are being phased out, and they're not accepting U.S. Treasury bonds, which we've been telling you all for the last year, that they would stop accepting U.S. Treasury bonds, and you would have a feedback loop, which is happening right now. And this is why you have a supply chain issue all over, i.e., and as Dr. Naila mentioned to me earlier today, one of my favorite stores, Dollar Tree, will be raising their prices.
Which is indicative of what's going on.
But we already knew it was coming. And I've always taken for myself. I don't tell people or suggest people do what I do. Because what I do is my choice to do in my sojourn here. I have deliberately for years kept my own personal life very, very simple. Although I'm capable of doing physical, constructive, great things. I like to see other people do stuff and I help along the way, but I keep my own life simple because I already know it's going to be made simple anyway. My position has always been the less I construct around me for my own self, the less they can steal from me. And while it's a sacrifice to some degree, that's my choice to do. But I also know that and knew that they would be liquidating people's states, i.e. stealing from you under the guise of law, color of authority, to do both things, to create stress, fear among the people, also to distract you, and also to cause harm. But I also knew that after the fact, as the people begin to reject Rome, that all your inherited estate will be returned to you. And so I focus for my personal self to keep my life simple, to keep the battle less, so I can also focus at moment's notice, because my spirit is that of a warrior, to be honest with you, that I would move with light baggage if necessary at a moment's notice, with less baggage. But that's my personal position. And so those ships are out there because nobody wants to trade with the Satanists anymore. However, because they are connected in many ways in the SWIFT trade platform that is being dismantled, actually, you see certain trade is continuous by necessity, but where it's not necessary, you'll see all of your big trade stores, etc., starting to have what you would call stock problems, and inflation that you're seeing in all of the areas, whether food or gas and stuff like that. As an example, when I went around the store yesterday before I came down to Dr. G's today, I was in Chakamonson territory. Of course, you all know it's the Philadelphia area. And I went around to the store that I often go to, because I do eat fish, and I was noticing when I went past the seafood, as an example, Dungeness crabs, which last year was $9.95, is now like $29 a pound. So that's like triple. That's called inflation. Inflation is put in place by corrupt government to rob the people without obviously saying that they're raising taxes. And this is what they're doing to try to save themselves, i.e., because the real deal, no one wants to trade with them anymore. And of course, by our people de facto being subject to their political corrupt jurisdictions, etc., are suffering the consequence. And this is back to arguments I've been making for years. Start enforcing the Constitution. One way you can do it, being the people of the land, is activating the pre-existing law of the land, consular venue in your matters, coming out from under their jurisdictional powers. You have to do it. No one can do it for you. However, you can choose not to and continue to suffer. I don't want to get into it right now, but I was digging through some papers earlier today to bring down here. One of this is this, and in the process, I found one of my old cards doing business, the house doctor, and I showed that to Dr. Naila, and that was my old, when I was doing business, the regular thing, and I was showing her where I used the AA 222141 non-obligation exemption principle on my cards. And I said, don't say North America, it says Northwestern Mexican. And when I did, when I built the daycare for my cousin, and the people from quote unquote city of Camden came around there talking about here's your permits and shit, and I told them move out the way, my blocks are coming, and I meant it too. And even when I bought the materials, I used that number, and we didn't pay that fake taxes on that. And the same thing I was doing when also I was doing the building in Buena Vista, which the fakers, de facto operators came and tried to stop that operation and literally took us to court, and they lost on that same principle. And of course, over the years, I've been trying to help our people to exercise their rights that already exist. And many people came around me who are plants, who have always been secretly pretending to be my friends when they were actually trying to undermine. I knew it all the time, but they were very useful because some of them were very intelligent. And in the process of scaling, they're helping to make the people confident. And in due time, as the people have evolved, the people will shed these parasites themselves because they have served their purpose in their greed and selfishness. Because sometimes, you know how you say, keep your enemies close to you? Is one of those points. However, understanding the higher self and lower self, this is how things operate here. And being that I'm in the spirit of a warrior, my ego is not in front of the issue. My issue is to get the work done for the people.
Well, for one last question, then we'll talk about the 30th. How about that?
Come again?
I was looking for one more question. This is up here like 10 times, so I'll ask it. Michael Jordan says, how important is it to remove silver mercury fillings?
How important is it?
To remove, I guess, fillings from your teeth that are silver or mercury.
Oh, because also, remember, one of the whole things that they have always been doing is that knowing that we are what you will call spiritual transmitters of the cosmos. We are divine beings manifested in human flesh. One of the things that they've been wanting to do from an experimental point of view, functional experimental point of view, was to get nanobots in the bloodstream, in your crystal stream. And this is again why they've been pressing desperately to get people to take the current jabs of graphene. However, one of the problems that they have run into, they have recognized that with many of the beings, that the graphene operations have what you call a degenerative lifespan, where they start losing power of magnetism for transmission of microwave and other technologies that they've been using for mind control. So they want you to get another jab, and then they want you to get another jab until they can perfect the transmutation of humanity and AI technology, so that they can literally turn you on and off, and thus control you electronically with what they have not necessarily been able to always do with what you would call the transmission of psychic attacks and mind control systems. So if they get it in your bloodline or in your blood, they can contaminate you. Also, the same way they did with the military operations with seeds and ovum of plant life, etc., patented, and then claim that the people are no longer part of the human family, and that the popes of Rome and the bishopric can, under unum sanctum, declare that the people that have taken the graphene shots are no longer part of the human family, and therefore are not, by rule of law, subject to human rights, and therefore can be eliminated at the will of those who have the patents on those different so-called interjections. And don't think that that's not what's going on, because it absolutely is. And I suggest that you tasks and the toils of everyday life, we get distracted by things that may appear interesting. And of course, there are many things that are of interest and absolutely related to our social, economic, and political condition. However, you have the appearance that many people keep forgetting that we've been invaded, that we are under occupation, and that the people who have been governing us are absolute and positively personators, imposters, misprision operatives, etc., and are indeed not the Aboriginal people of the land. And because they have controlled the narrative, the educational system, which many of you are familiar with, the philosophy page of John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates in their animal husbandry training, adopted from Sigmund Freud, etc., who was used as a pattern by them for doing mind control, etc., as Sigmund Freud studied Asiatic African culture, and of course the ancient and established knowledge of both sound and light and the operations of the brain of humanity, which is ancient technology. And of course they've been using that knowledge against the actual direct descendants of the ancient Asiatic African peoples, etc., are commonly known as Kemites, Ham, etc., Canaan, Moabite, etc. And in your collective world of your contemporary operations on the planet Midgard, on this firmament, known collectively as Moors. I want to remind you, because I think a lot of times, because of the pressures and the cruel, unfair, and debilitating and toxic methods and activities that are induced upon the people of the land, socially, politically, economically, etc., that many of our people, and particularly the younger generations, by having limited reference points, forget that we are under occupation for quite a few generations and start falling into the mind control systems of the animal husbandry systems adopted from Sigmund Freud. And so it's important for us, and particularly those who recognize and know this, to never forget it and to keep in mind that we can't recreate the nation. The nation already exists. The nation has been damaged. No different than an issue of a storm coming through and damaging your house and your estate and the land. You can't remake the land. You have to use what the land gives you to make repairs. And you also have to keep in mind your knowledge in harmony with nature of the materials available to you and the elements available to you to make such repairs. Of course, that now you're dealing in the aggregate physical. When we're talking about the physical houses, the physical estates, etc. But as most of you know, that estate is not limited to your physical buildings, etc. It also deals with your hereditaments, all your liberties, etc. And as a reminder for many of you, because as you know, as we've talked over the years, a lot of the subject matters that we may redundantly repeat has more to do and is more directed to those who are awakening, distinguished from, but not limited to, those who have been erudite in both the political, civil realm and in positive law jurisprudence, and of course with the operations, knowingly, of the Circle Church and Chancery members of the Roman Curia, who have been perpetrating frauds under the guise of judicial and extrajudicial activities. And they have done so quite successfully. Also, with the including and with consideration of the fact that many of the people, the natural people among our own, who over the generations have taken positions of leadership and positions of authority, though limited because of the occupational powers, etc. Very often these beings actually fail to tell the people the true history of them being the true Americans, distinguished from those who have been governing our people under de facto operations. And this is why, again, over the years, we've reminded the people to not forget the distinction between de jure and de facto operations, etc. And so, again, and this is more directed to many people around the land who are becoming cognate of, logically, of the loss of their birthright, because our people are being abused on many fronts. And of course, the human trafficking aspect of the Spanish Inquisition operations in the Western Hemisphere has reared its head, and the people are more aware, although many are still in denial, of the human trafficking aspect of the United States Corporation Company, which most of you know by now is a private foreign human trafficking for profit corporate entity conglomeration of Roman Curia member corporations, etc., regulated under or what you call guided by field operatives known as the attorneys, esquires, lawyers, etc., members of the British Accredited Registry, registered, of course, as you all know, and operative main headquarters at Fleet Street, England. And those bodies, politics and governing bodies, govern and control all of the pseudo court systems that have been operating at North America actually since the early 1800s. Now that is the truth. And you must keep in mind, and you must remember that there have been no lawful operative courts. Article 3 for ambassadors, diplomats, and consulars in relationship to treaty obligations and enforcement, and constitutional obligations in relationship to those treaties and the enforcement, and all obligations in force related to them have been pretty much artificially neutralized, although they are lawfully still in force. And of course, many of you already know the distinction between lawful and legal. And while we won't go into that because we really want to get into the heart of some of these matters to encourage many of you to stay strong under the pressures that are being brought to bear on the people, because the fact, as we've been saying to you, particularly we've been reinforcing it for the last few years, for people to recognize that all masks are off. And when we have said that, in these last couple of years, we are acknowledging the divine evolutionary nature of us coming under a new, or what you'll call a brighter energy of the Aquarian constellation. And of course, that energy disallows much of the corruption of the priesthood that was constructed under the Piscean energy constellation that we are leaving. And that's aside from the fact many of you all know that this firmament has passed through the Futon belt, and you have a different energy also from the sun relative to our position in relationship to the sun. And this has much to do why the dark priesthood has put so much focus on having people argue among each other on a point of distraction as to whether the firmament is flat or round, etc., to divert you from paying attention to the fact of the matter is that they're wrongfully and corruptedly governing you and misgoverning you on your land, with the also intent of extinguishing you under genocide and then claiming your estate. I want to remind you, I want to go to the law book and read estate for those of you who, because we're so busy sometimes fighting back in our different methods and ways to counter the corrupt operations that is almost absolutely apparent. As a matter of fact, the hybrid Europeans are so contemptuous, and they're also